Hey, welcome back to Connection Point Studies. We're glad to have you. This is the third week for some new groups have started.
Yeah.
Now, you got to give some advice, Ron. I've led some groups. And,
Right.
And some groups are kind of getting in. Let's give a piece of advice before we get started today.
Okay, so for some people like me, you talk too much.
Oh.
You just talk too much, all right? Let somebody else answer a question, will you?
I have an idea. If you have somebody that's dominating in your group, I'm sure that's not a problem anywhere, like if you have a Ron with you. Take a little egg timer and say, anybody can take 1 minute and talk, and never, and that just works out really well.
That's a great idea.
And then everybody gets a chance to do it. That's a nice piece of advice for people, and it's kind of good. And if you happen to be the leader that week, and you look around and no one's talking, pick the person. We have a guy in our group that doesn't hardly say anything, and we always get him to say something, and it's really fun. It's like a challenge to hear from somebody you don't normally hear from.
Right.
Well, that's just a little piece of advice. And we have a warm-up question. Just a reminder, warm-up questions are for everybody to answer. It's another clothing question.
Yeah.
Kind of a fun one, so let's give it to them.
Well, okay, so in your closet, back in the corner, or up on the shelf, maybe you got something in there.
Or right in front of you.
Yeah. Maybe you got something in there that doesn't fit. Now, you're thinking, well, maybe I'll gain some weight or lose some weight or whatever. And so for some reason, you're holding on to it. Why is it you're keeping that thing? Or do you think maybe it'll come back in style or whatever? Why are you keeping that thing?
Or are you going to grow into it or shrink into it? I know what that's like. So have fun. Everybody has to answer this. You got to tell what it is and how to do it. Before you come back, read Colossians 3, verses 8 through 11. And hopefully, in your own personal time, you're reading the whole chapter of Colossians and thinking about it each week as you come to these studies. Okay, when you look at this whole passage, we actually titled this The Quandary of Anger.
Yeah.
And I did that because it's the very first thing in his list. Get rid of anger and wrath and malice and slander. And all of those are kind of an angry language. And usually those things come out of our mouth when we're angry, right? That's usually when what do they say? You can always tell what a person's like if you squeeze them a little bit. And I love to squeeze people to see what comes out, I know.
You do that, don't you?
I do that, yeah. It's a part of them. So we're talking about the dilemma of anger and what happens when you get angry and what comes out of your mouth and how do you deal with anger. And that's the whole thing. And in order to do that, we're digging into Colossians 3, verses 8 through 11. So we have a couple of questions for him to dig into.
Yeah. So I noticed that Paul, quite a bit in this passage, used time-oriented language. And so another thing I often like to do when I'm looking at the Bible and trying to understand what Paul was saying is I look at, well, is he talking about something that's already happened or something that's in the future? So you can get a clue kind of from the verb tense that he uses. So if you look kind of through this passage and even up in verse 7, you'll see some time-oriented language. So just kind of make a note at the verb tenses and things that he said in this passage. It'll help you to understand it.
So dig in, look at it, we'll come back and talk about it. So Ron, look at these tenses. The tenses are kind of counterbalancing. Explain, what's the wording?
So he says, you used to be this in verse 7, but now. And I think what he's saying is that, if Christ comes into your life, there should be a used to, but now.
Hey, did he include himself in that? He had to, because I know Paul had a little bit of an anger, I think.
I bet he was a fiery dude.
I think he did. So isn't that the way for all of us? There's some stuff that used to be this way, and now it's this way.
Right.
But there's some stuff that needs to change too. And that's really what we're talking about, the quandary of who we need to be and not who we used to be.
You used to wear that ugly suit with the wide lapels, but now you don't.
Yeah, now we don't. That's good. All right, so we've kind of got that figured out. So let's give him another question to dig in.
Okay, so Paul says, used to, but now. The question is what? What does Paul say you should do instead? And you find that in verses 8 and 9.
Okay, anger.
Yeah.
I never get angry. Rage.
Of course not. You're a pastor. You can't get angry.
Rage, malice, slander. These are words are kind of interesting words.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, filthy language, lies.
Right.
Powerful words. Those things we're supposed to get rid of, right?
You know what I struggle with, though? I mean, we've been saying it's the Holy Spirit who changes you, and yet he says, rid yourself.
So I
struggle with that. That's a quandary for me.
So this is our part of the lawn work, right? I'm giving the lawn to the Lord, but this is what he wants me to do with the lawn.
Yeah.
Isn't that a part of it?
Yeah, that's it. That's it exactly. Yeah.
And it's hard. This is hard work. And honestly, we all have to work at this area, but it's really powerful. And those words are powerful words. Now, we have a third question for them to dig into.
Yeah. So the question is, okay, I get what he's saying, but why? Why does he say this? Does he give a reason? And you find the reason in verse 9.
So, Ron, help us see what is happening in verse 9 here.
Yeah, this was a hard question, and you might have wondered, scratch your head, like, what is he talking about? What reason? Well, he says since. That's a clue, because that's the reason why. It could be translated because. Mm-hmm. And he says, since you have put off the old man with his practices and have put on the new man. And Dan, I'm in this quandary because I'm like, he sounds like it's already done, but yet he says it's already done, but he says, now you need to do it. And I think
it's kind of been the whole way through this whole passage, right?
Yeah, how does that work?
Yeah, in fact, you've kind of listed out a number of things. You've been raised, and yet you're supposed to put to death some stuff, and there's this whole quandary. And how does that work? The practical side to me is I look at the things that he talks about putting off. And when it says put off anger and all those sort of things, I think there is a day and a time where we kind of put some of those things aside, and then they kind of come back, and we're reminded. To me, anger always makes me want to step back and see why I got angry.
Yeah.
And wrath and filthy language. And the question is, why? Why am I using those language? Why am I talking that way? Why did I? The why helps me put it off, helps me understand what's happening. And sometimes it reveals some inside parts of me that need to change.
Yeah. Well, he said at the beginning of this passage in Colossians 3, we saw this the first week, that your new life is hidden. And I thought, wow, isn't that interesting? You have this new life, but it's hidden with Christ. Mm-hmm. It's almost as if we made the choice for the new life, but we're still learning what it means to be that new life.
And he's revealing it and changing us. And I'm glad it's a work in progress. I want to continue to grow and learn. And sometimes I have to put off anger and wrath and all the kind of things that come along. And I'm just like everyone else. So let's dig in this passage a little bit further. And the fourth question is what?
Yeah, so the fourth question is, what's your take on this? We were just discussing this kind of have taken off, but, and have put on, but yet there's, put to death and rid yourself. And so there's work that we're doing now, but it sounds like maybe it was already done. How do you deal with that?
And how are you doing with that? That's a good chance for you to reveal a little bit and talk about that. And we'll come back and talk some more. So hopefully you had some really good discussion on that, but we want them to focus one last thought, one last section here.
Yeah.
We've got a passage for them to look at here, and let's dig in here.
Yeah, so in verse 10, there's a clue about how Paul deals with this tension. And he describes a key element of this process of transformation. And if you could put it into one word, even, that's a real bonus. What is the one word that really nails transformation? And you can also look at Colossians 1:9 and Colossians 2:2, where you'll see the same thing used.
Right. And hopefully you'll get the answer to that question. And after you've done that and kind of discussed this whole thing, share prayer requests around, and maybe you even talk about your own issues in these areas of things that you're changing, and ask God to help you change some of those things in your life. And we will see you next week at Connection Point Studies.